talking about high-performing maidens today, and I think probably some people thought we might be talking exclusively about maidens mated at 2 years of age, but we're going to actually focus in most of the data around ewe lambs and what their management is through joining, pregnancy, etc. But it will become clear at the end why that's important for maidens as well. But we'll just put that up front. The case for mating ewe lambs is quite a strong economic case. So for every 10% increase in weaning rate, we get about a return of $5.50 to $7 per ewe. So if we're looking at increases of 30 to 40%, we can spend sort of upwards of $20 on that ewe before we break even in terms of that return. So, and there's also been some other economic work around the traps that shows basically joining ewe lambs is quite economical if you can do it. So that's a big if. But and some other data around this is a difference in another modelling study, an economic study as well. Basically, as we increase weaning rate, we get an increase in profitability, gross margin, etc., whatever you talk. But the economic case is quite strong to do it. Most of that's based around that we're getting a greater use of efficiency of energy use, sorry. Essentially 60 to 70% of the energy that goes down that ewe's throat during the year is just purely for maintenance. So whether you join that ewe or not, that's what it's going to cost you. So to add the extra 20 to 30% in there to get a reproductive cycle out in terms of cost of energy, it's actually not that great in terms of the actual cost we need to do. This is just a graph of two different mature sizes. The top one's an 80 kilo ewe and the bottom one's a 50 kilo ewe. And this is essentially the energy intake throughout a full year. The solid line is a ewe that's managed to grow well through the next bit, and this is the extra energy requirement through pregnancy and lactation, etc., if it was in lamb. So I'm just trying to probably get across that yes, they might be hard to manage, etc., but the actual cost to the enterprise is not that great in terms of what you already have to put into that animal to have it on the farm. This presentation will be available afterwards, but this is just a table I've pulled out of a summary of some ewe lamb stuff. The potential advantages, potential disadvantages. You need to be aware that there is disadvantages to doing it, and that if you're not up to speed in terms of your management, your feed budgeting, etc., then you can run into problems. I'll just put it up there, but the reality is nationally less than 20% of maternal or 5% of merino ewe lambs are actually joined across the industry. So there's quite an industry growth, if you like, in terms of profitability, but also lamb output from mating ewe lambs. So there's a lot of potential there yet. It's an area of growth for our businesses. Most of the reproductive success in ewe lambs is based around three main factors, and we're going to run through those in the presentation today. So genetics, nutrition, and your management, and you could argue that the genetics and nutrition your management as well, but there's a strong interplay between those three factors when we talk about mating ewe lambs. It's very hard to pull out those components and say separately this bit attributed was 100% or this bit was 50%. It's quite a complex interplay. Probably the most critical thing out of that interplay is that live weight at joining is the most critical factor for reproductive success in ewe lambs. So as we across the bottom there, we've got a couple of different ewe types. Live weight across the bottom there. As we increase live weight at joining, reproductive rate goes up. It's purely and simply that. If we break that down a bit further, that live weight at joining into whether they're single, twins or dries, essentially what we see is a decrease in the dries as we increase that live weight, an increase in the number of twins, and a slight decrease in the singles. So as we increase that joining weight, we actually increase the conception rate, so the number of ewes pregnant, but we also increase the number of multiple wearing ewes as well. So something to keep around. The response is obviously a bit larger in say, a composite genotype, particularly if you just note the twin responsiveness versus the two. It's probably a bit of an artefact that we've selected a wool breed to produce wool for the last 100, 150 years, and its reproduction is probably not quite as responsive as a meat genotype that we're looking to produce lambs out of. In saying that, there are merinos out there that can do exactly or a very similar rate to what those composites can do as well. We just said live weight joining is highly important for reproductive success, and what we do know in the genetic front is that progeny from high P weight size are basically heavier at joining. So when we talk about selecting for breeding values or Australian sheep breeding values, we're talking about the size effect on his daughters. So whenever we put any ASB effects up, they're the size impacts on his daughters. So we can see there as we increase sire ASB for P post-weaning weight, the live weight goes up. Pretty straightforward. We should be well aware of that anyway. But what we see is that because we're increasing that joining weight, reproduction increases as P weight goes up as well. So if you increase P weight in your sires, you will get the response in the ewe lambs in reproduction. So quite a easy thing to do. What's also nice and should be pretty easily recognised, number of lambs born. If we select animals for number of lambs born, then we get an increase in the reproductive success of those ewe lambs when we join them. Essentially a fertility trait or a reproduction trait. We improve the reproduction, we improve how ewe lambs can mate and join up.
Andrew, sorry, you've got two different traits down the bottom there. You've got sire ASB, the NLV percentage, and then the other one's yearling number of lambs. Sorry,
they should be both yearling. There's a Y missing there. Very, very observant. So the number of lambs born ASB that we were just talking about. We also know that, and you've probably heard over the last few years that positive selection for fat depth or fat and breeding value has a response in reproduction in mature animals. Some things around robustness, resilience, etc. It also has a positive response in those ewe lambs when their sires have been selected for positive P-fat. Essentially there we can see the response in merinos, that is, that chart, that we have positive fat across those joining weights, we get an increase in reproductive success. The genetics is great. We can get some good responses, and we know we're starting to work out, if we select for certain traits in the sires, where that sends our ewe lambs in terms of their reproductive success. But it doesn't mean much if we don't have the nutrition to back it up. And it's probably, even though we've talked about the genetic effects up front, the nutrition story is probably almost critical. If we aren't doing if you're not doing some sort of feed budgeting, haven't experienced lifetime ewe management or something like that, then your success of being able to feed those ewe lambs and do a good job on them is probably reasonably limited. So I'd encourage you to get the nutrition part sorted before we go hard on the genetic side of things, because it's like you won't be able to reap the benefits of those genetics if you don't apply the right nutrition. This is high nutrition, low nutrition, better success through the joining period. So if we have high nutrition up to and through the joining period, then we get a better response to live weight across the bottom at the full range. So it's quite important up to and through that joining period to have high nutrition and on a positive plane of nutrition. High growth rate through that joining period. So yes, we're on positive plane of nutrition, but we get a definite growth rate response during that joining period if they're on a positive profile through that joining period. Very clear response. Just a couple of management aspects that we want to focus on. RAM percentage. The current recommendation is 1 to 50 ewes. there's a response if you keep on going down to 1 to 30, but there's also good responses at 1 to 100. The problem with going to higher RAM percentages is have you got enough RAMs? So the lower you go, the better you'll be, but the reality is you won't lose too much by not having, if you haven't got enough RAMs, then you've got to trade that off with not buying more RAMs for the effect. So the teasing thing is quite interesting in ewe lambs. It's actually probably a big requirement if you are going to join ewe lambs. So for sectomised rams or wethers that have been dosed up, the response is in the order. So the red line down the bottom is non-teased versus the green line at the top teased across the live weight adjoining range, and up the side is those that achieve puberty. What happens in the ewe lamb is that when she's exposed to the ram, she will do what we probably call a silent ovulation. Now she may or may not conceive on that, but generally she won't conceive on that. But if she does, the embryo generally fails anyway. Now, consequence of that is that it then takes probably another 17 to 20 days before she'll actually properly cycle again. If you put the rams out for 4 to 5 weeks, well, we're potentially wiping away half of that period or nearly 3/4 of that period where she will be willing to basically take the ram. So if we can tease those rams 15 days before we stick the rams out, we will actually get a lot of that silent ovulation out of the way, so that when the rams do go out, you have a lot greater success. And that's really the 30 to 40% increase in that teasing is through that effect. It's getting rid of any of those silent ovulations and potential early embryo mortality. One of the key things that's coming through, and I must say the research is ongoing in this space. We've probably focused on 5 years of how you get ewe lambs in lamb and all the management around it and genetic effects that we were just putting up there. But now we're starting to focus on how that ewe lamb's managed through pregnancy and what lifetime performance is, and etc. and everything. What a key function we're looking at now is that live weight that's achieved at joining is also critical for birth weight at lambing and also weaning weight on the follow through. So by getting that ewe lamb up to speed, up to weight, we're taking a fair bit of that growth bit early on when she can grow, and we're not actually trying to make her grow a lot when she's trying to carry a conceptus and she's pregnant. You must realise ewe lambs, immature animals, probably don't start to mature until they're 18 to 24 months of age, and we're expecting ewe lambs to actually wean a lamb by that stage. They are still growing, bone, structure, everything, while they're pregnant. So that's essentially why they need a little bit of looking after, but also getting that critical absolute weight early makes that management through pregnancy, lactation through to weaning a lot easier. So that last graph was for merinos, and this one's for some composite genotypes. Quite, look at those triple lands. If anybody's, if you're pretty au fait with your lifetime ewe management guidelines, we know that 4.5 kilos is basically a critical lower threshold for lamb survival. We'd expect it's probably, and this is part of the work that's still to come, it's probably maybe slightly lower for ewe lambs, but if we don't get that joining weight up at joining, then particularly these animals that are down this lower end, probably hitting that threshold, so they might carry a pregnancy, but they've got a more than highly likely chance that they'll probably lose that at lambing, or lamb survival will be compromised. So pretty important. The same thing, pretty good response in weaning weight. The heavier the ewe weight at joining, we get an increase in weaning weight. So I said at the start we weren't really focused on maidens made at 2 years of age, and I think the rationale that we've got, whether you're mating as a ewe lamb or 2 years of age, that joining weight's critical, and this is what this graph's showing. So if you think that you are going to run that ewe lamb hard over a 12-month period and join her as a 2-year-old, you're probably really not saving yourself much because you're going to be in the same circumstance again when you come around to join her at 2 years of age. And getting that weight on early is probably going to make that animal a lot more efficient going forward as well in terms of being able to have reproductive success. Andrew Buffler was just saying in the previous one about his experience where I think he said, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think he said 16% those, so he had counterparts mated as ewe lambs versus those mated at 2 years of age, and life or the next lambing 16% better those ones done at ewe lambs. So, and there's some evidence that we're starting to get through now that their lifetime performance by mating them as ewe lambs and looking after them or getting that critical weight then has a subsequent effect on how they are at their 2-year-old lambing, if they're lambed as a 1-year-old, and subsequent lambing as well. So just to run through the key steps, because I just want to leave you with sort of some key things to pull out that if you are doing it or want to do it, you can leave here today. So ewe lambs heavier at mating will have reached puberty earlier. They'll have higher fertility, e.g. conception rate, number of ewes pregnant, and they'll also have higher overall reproductive rate. Ewe lambs have higher fertility if we select them for growth rate, i.e. P weight or Y weight, ASBVs, fat depth as well, so P fat or Y fat as ASBVs. Ewe lambs heavier at mating from improved nutrition will have greater reproductive success as well. So it's just not the genetics we're talking about. If they're in better condition, if they're getting a higher live weight at joining, they'll have greater success. This is an absolute clear one to take away. If you're going to do it, tease lambs 15 days beforehand, and then whack the rams in after that. You can leave those testosterone wethers in there. Somebody was saying that they still bash up the rams. We want mature rams in there not ram lambs. Vasectomised rams can tend to bash up those rams or interrupt. So if you do have vasectomised rams, probably take them out, is what we're probably thinking. 1 to 50 ratio if possible, if you've got the rams on board. If you can go lower, you get a bit more of a response, but obviously ram availability is a key thing there. Joining weight, highly important for ewe performance during pregnancy and lactation. So on that birth weight and survival, so it's a preemptive thing. We need to get that ewe weight up so she conceives, gets in lamb, but then it is a follow-through effect on how she at lambing and then the survival afterwards and the weaning weight. So highly important. I'll just finish up here and we can go some questions. All that material that I've just flashed through then is becoming available through RIST as a lifetime weaners course, hopefully later in the year. There's more research happening as we speak as well. But it will be something of a very similar model to lifetime ewe management, but all the way through from weaner survival to how those ewes are managed through joining, pregnancy, etc.
A lot about weight targets, but not necessarily condition score targets. So
Yep.
the condition score targets still in line with lifetime ewe management, or are they slightly different?
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, the better condition animals are in at joining, the better response will be as well. Sure, yeah. Look, we tend to talk weight because they're immature animals. People have a little bit more strife condition scoring. Ewe lambs, etc. The PFAT response, classic. We know PFAT condition score and muscling and growth, etc. all pretty much positively correlate. So animals in better condition will have a better response.
Just a question on timing of mating with ewe lambs, in particular. We mated both Composite and Merinos last year. We were autumn lambers. We scanned, and the scanning man said we went by the scanning leaves, none of them would be pregnant, which proved to be pretty right. He said basically most ewe lambs won't get pregnant unless you mate them in the autumn.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep, correct. So sheep are short day breeders. They follow photo period, so day length, and essentially that's a evolutionary mechanism. When it's either not cold, wet winter, they want to have their progeny on the ground when it's spring. So Merinos are probably better than most of your British breeds. In particular, probably Border Leicesters, Coopworths, etc. are quite seasonal. So if you are mating them outside that probably February to April, May window, then you will have trouble with reproduction in terms of getting them in lamb. They won't sod. Yep, you're spot on. Look, teasing in Merinos, we'll get over a bit of that. But yes, it is definitely a problem.
How long do you recommend leaving your rams in?
Look, if you're teasing, it's up to you. Everybody's got varied joining lengths. The thing is, at joining sets up the rest of your management operations from there forward. So the tighter you can get it, then the tighter every other management intervention is after that. So it's a flow-on effect. It's probably personal choice to how much you want to spread it out. Generally, if we get 2 cycles in, 17-day cycles, so 34, 35 days, we're probably getting 95% of those pregnant that are going to get pregnant.
Andrew, what did you say the effect on the ewe was subsequent years of pregnancy?
Yeah. Look, that work's underway currently at the moment, but it's the anecdotal evidence at the moment is that it's quite cumulative, that we do get a lifetime response from those ewes that have a successful mating earlier. And I suppose it's probably logical to some extent that generally animals that have great, better reproduction earlier generally have better reproduction as they go later on. But yeah, that's to come. There's another project just recently about to kick off on all that stuff. And to really get some better management, we know live weight at joining is having a big response at lamb survival, but we need to go and actually work out those responses, survival for condition score during pregnancy. We don't have that. That's one of the things we don't have.